you ready for an entertainment experience of a lifetime? Knockdown, drag-out, hard-hitting conversations, debates, and interviews. Well, if you said yes to any of these questions, sit back, relax, and enjoy something like no other. This is the Isolation Series podcast, presented by Wellbeingsperformance.com for all your online meeting needs, and by ImprintPilates.com Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's premier Pilates studio, also specializing in rehabilitation and athletic conditioning, and finally by greenstorage.ca Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's #1 self-storage facility. Here now is your host, Spencer Miller.
Hey guys, and welcome to this Monday edition of the Isolation Series with me, Spencer Miller. Very pleased to be joined by my co-host with the most, the one and only Paul Shields. And Paul, I couldn't think of a more appropriate background for you to have after yesterday's events than Moe's Tavern, because I don't know about you, Paul, but myself, and I'm sure you, and about, half, if not 3/4 of the sports fans in the country of Canada feel like about 19 flaming Moes today. And that's where we start today's podcast. And obviously, we talk about the chaos that broke down yesterday going into the final regular season game 162 of the Major League Baseball season, where there were 4 teams vying for 2 wild card spots: the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Mariners, and the Red Sox. And the Blue Jays came out with their hitting shoes on and did what they needed to do right off the bat, scoring early and scoring often with a leadoff home run by George Springer, who then hit a grand slam later in the game to make it 9-1, and they ended up winning 12-4. We thought that we were going to get some help for a large part of the game by the Washington Nationals, beating up on the Yankees 5-2, but late in the game, that was not the case. They tied it up and then ended up going ahead 7-5. And what a game in the Bronx yesterday between the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees. It was a 0-0 tie going into the bottom of the ninth, and Aaron Judge hit a walk-off for them to win 1-0. So we know that sports can be something that we all love a lot of the time, but it can be heartbreaking as well, as evident of what happened yesterday, especially, like I said, after Washington went ahead 5-1 at one point, and you thought it was looking good for the Jays to play today. And then in the end, not quite enough. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm of two mindsets on what transpired yesterday. The Blue Jays put themselves in an unfortunate situation when they lost that series to the Yankees last week. They put themselves in a situation where they didn't entirely control their own fate, and unfortunately, that turned out to be their undoing. They played great in the series against Baltimore. They did exactly what they needed to do. But of course, disappointing ending with, neither the Rays or the Nationals being able to help the Jays out on the last day of the season. But on the flip side, this team had what can only be considered as a successful season, right? After having 3 different home ballparks, after everything that they went through with man games lost to injury, this is a team of resilience that just continued to fight and literally battled to the very last day. So as a Blue Jay fan, while I'm disappointed that they didn't make the playoffs this year, because I think they deserved better, this is a 91-win team that played very well under some incredibly unique circumstances throughout this season. So you hope that they can build on this. You hope that this is just the start of consistent contention for years to come now with this core group. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed to not see them playing postseason ball this year.
After seeing what they did coming back on July 30th and playing those last 35-40 games in Toronto, or however many games it ended up being, they had a record of 40-22 after that point. I am now convinced that if they had the crowd the whole season, whether it be 15,000 and then increased to 30,000 at some point, that it would have resulted in about 3 or 4 more wins at the very least. I know that it's speculation and we can only talk about what ifs and everything like that, but I firmly believe Charlie when he says that they would have had at least 5, 6, 7 more wins playing at home for a lot longer.
Yeah, I totally agree, and the numbers would bear that out as well. Like the Blue Jays in significantly fewer games in Dunedin lost more. They were 11-12 with Dunedin as their home field. They only lost 11 games at the Rogers Center at the Sky Dome this year. Like that's, it was like 40-11 that they ended up, or something along those lines, 35-11, whatever it might be. I'm not going to wake up Uncle Google just yet, but it, like that in itself shows me how comfortable they are playing in that stadium, hitting in that stadium, and how much the fans kind of, rejuvenated that team when they returned back to the Rogers Center. So I 100% agree. And I totally believe Charlie when he says that they probably had 3 or 4, 5 more wins in the tank if they were playing at Skydome all year.
And I also believe that if we had a healthy George Springer all year, that we wouldn't have even come down to the last game, because as the numbers bear out, and if you want to wake up Uncle Google, you can. If not, no worries. But as the numbers bear out, this team is a totally different team with George Springer doing George Springer things at the top of the lineup. And we saw that for the last 10 days again, because he ended up, finally feeling good to what he was doing before the injury in Seattle. And, we saw George Springer do George Springer things. Again, hypotheticals are hypotheticals. I understand that. But the numbers don't lie in this instance. And I believe that if George was healthy for the majority of this season, not only would we have more wins by a half dozen at least, just based on that, but we would also be talking about another potential American League MVP, because if you project the numbers out over 162 games based on what he did, I would assume that it would be close to 43, 44 home runs himself in the leadoff spot, no less.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things you can point to. Like the Springer injury is one thing, but if we look at this team was a young team that was evolving. And so, of course, like if the bullpen's better, if they don't have key injuries like you mentioned, then there is some wiggle room there where they probably would have won more games. The other thing is we're talking about a young ball club that lost a lot of 1-run games. Some of that goes down to the bullpen depth just not being there early in the season, but some of that is just learning how to win consistently. And again, we harp on it on this show, but you'll hear it everywhere. First full season for Biggio, Bichette, Vladdy Jr. And those are the guys that you're basically building this team around. For them to be this close and this competitive for this season is exceptional. So again, like I said earlier, you hope that, losing some of those 1-run games at the beginning of the season, the guys understand the value of those points and those games won. And they're able to contend, get even that much closer, and actually get into the postseason next year.
So the question then becomes this: we've talked about it a couple times previously in recent podcasts, and that is they have a couple key free agents. We've laid it out here before. Like I said, Robbie Ray, potential Cy Young Award winner, and in my mind, the front runner to be the Cy Young Award winner in the American League, and Marcus Semien, who ended up signing a 1-year, $18 million contract, getting 45 home runs, and over 100 RBIs himself. As we go into the winter meetings at the beginning of December, where a lot of things get done for the Major League Baseball offseason, I might add, do you anticipate that one, if not both of them, have come back? Because they definitely deserve to test the free agent market, and I believe both of them are going to get paid. Or do you believe that they are going to do everything that they can to potentially bring back somebody like a Robbie Ray and look at the free agent market and look at bringing in somebody like a Matt Chapman from the Oakland Athletics or a Corey Seager from the LA Dodgers to shore up the offense production that you might be missing from Marcus Semien next year?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because Semien had a career year, a record-breaking year. And, the same almost could be said for Robbie Ray. Like, these are two guys that had exceptional seasons. I think the Blue Jays are at a time in the development of this team where they need to spend. I would be spending. I would be trying to keep these guys in the fold. Baseball is one of the few sports who doesn't have a salary cap. So pay these guys, get them on the team, and do more. Give this team what it needs to take the next step. And I believe that includes Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien. Now, that doesn't mean that they want to stay, or that, they're not going to get their doors blown off with some ludicrous offer from another team, which is entirely possible. But if I'm the Blue Jays management, I want to know what it takes. And I think these are two guys that they should be working to keep on this team.
We know that bullpen arms are one of the most fickle aspects of professional baseball from a year-to-year basis. You could have a lights out reliever one year, and then the reliever comes back the next year and just is not the same. My question to you is, the big question for this club, or one of the big questions for this club all throughout the year, like you talked about and like we've talked about, is the inconsistency of the bullpen. What do you believe needs to happen so that the Jays can feel confident going into next year with their bullpen setup?
Well, I think you unpacked a lot there, Spence. Bullpens are notoriously fickle. You even look at Rafael Dolis. Last year, he was among the best relievers in the game with incredible visual, one look numbers and incredible underlying numbers. This year he was a dumpster fire. He couldn't get anything over the plate, and he cost the Blue Jays some really important games, as we found out yesterday. So I think that you can only go on the performance of some of the guys that you saw this year. I think that the Jays need to take less chances on guys that they're unsure of. I think that the more they're able to commit to players that we have a better idea of the performance they're going to give to you, the Adam Simbers and the of the world, like guys like that, I think they need to have more guys like that around and less question marks in their bullpen.
One of the biggest question marks that we need to talk about as well is Kirby Yates. They signed Kirby Yates to a couple-year contract out of San Diego, and he was supposed to be their projected closer at the beginning of the season, and then he gets injured and has Tommy John surgery. As we know, Tommy John surgery takes 9 to 12 months minimum to come back from, and we've seen Tim Meza be able to do that spectacularly somehow twice. I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing, but if you can get Kirby Yates coming back to spring training looking like the Kirby Yates of old, that could be an added bonus right there, because you have Kirby Yates, Jordan Romano, Trevor Richards, Adam Simber, and who else am I missing there? Oh, Tim Mason. Yeah. So that's a pretty good amount of relievers to count on right there. If Kirby Yates can come back and be a shell of his old self, that's, again, giant question marks. But the other big question I'm going to put out to you is this. I know that the season ended just yesterday, less than 24 hours from when we are doing this podcast. But based on everything that you saw, and especially that you saw this team do when it got back home this year, do you believe that the Blue Jays either A, match their 91 win total next year, or B, somehow surpass it by about 5 or 6 games.
Well, I think if they want to make the playoffs, they need to be in, they need to add to the total, right? 91 wins just didn't do the job this year. And of course, every year is different and who knows what happens next season, but they have to be projecting for, upwards of 95 plus wins. So, and playing in the American League East, it's not going to get any easier. The Yankees and the Red Sox will be front of the line to offer guys like Robbie Ray and Marcus Semien all the money they could want, right? So you're not going to get any relief. And the Rays just somehow managed to continue to churn out good baseball teams. So, there's, you cannot expect that the same amount of wins or less wins will get you where you want to go. So in my opinion, you got to be shooting for 95 or more.
Right. And big shout out to friend of the show, Charlie Montoyo. He took all the criticism this year, sometimes justified, sometimes not justified, put his head down and did his job to the best of his ability. And him, along with his coaching staff, did a spectacular job.
Yeah, I think Charlie took some criticism, both warranted and unwarranted, throughout the year. There's certainly things that we've talked about on this show, but all in all, he has done an exceptional job managing a young team through a really tumultuous year. And managed to put amazing results on the field. So I hope for many that's kind of calmed some of the criticisms. Of course, there's things we'd all like to see differently. That's what being a fan of a sports team is all about. But I thought Charlie did an exceptional job.
Right. And before we end this podcast today, I just want to switch to the NFL and talk about the return of Tom Brady in New England. Everybody thought that it was going to be Tom rolling over Bill. That, in fact, was not the case. It came down to the last moments of the fourth quarter, and Tampa squeaked out a 2.19-17 win. And it ended up being a fairly entertaining game in the rain in New England yesterday, regardless of it being a low score. And I was happy to see, Bill and Tom show each other the respect that everybody thought needed to be there. And in fact, according to both of them, has always been there. The media, more oftentimes than not, just blows it out of proportion.
Yeah, I thought it was a very entertaining game. Despite the score, I thought it was pretty captivating. The two things that I took out of the game. One, I thought the emotion of the moment actually kind of overwhelmed Brady in the first quarter, even in the first half. He just didn't look like his dialed in self. And this is, that's not a criticism. This is without hyperbole, a game that we never thought we'd see. So if we as fans never thought we'd see Brady versus Belichick, you can guess that the two of them never expected this to happen. Right. So he played really well coming out of the third quarter. Like the second half, he played well. If the third quarter was good, but New England's defense was what was really impressive to me. And the way that they continued to mix things up and really made it hard for Brady to get any of those big, huge plays. Mac Jones looked really good. He looked very Brady-esque in some of his reads.
And that, to me, is the big thing that I took away, is that Mac Jones did not allow such a big occasion and all of that pressure to get to him.
Yeah, well, and I think I don't know, because I haven't read any of the stories today on the game yesterday, but Mac Jones is kind of he's sort of removed from the Belichick Brady era in the sense that he didn't play on a team with Brady. He's coming in as a brand new player here, just trying to prove that he's ready to play in the NFL. So he's got a lot other things going on. So I wonder if, obviously you understand the pressure of the moment, you understand the stage of the game, but I really got the sense that he wanted to prove that he could do it. He wanted to prove that he was ready to handle that kind of pressure.
And by all intents and purposes, along with the defense, like you said, he did what he needed to do in order to keep his team very much in the game all the way until the end there.
Yeah, and I mean it's hard to fault special teams or the kicker with a 50-yard field goal in the pouring rain. That's a tough way to try and win a game. But yeah, Mac Jones and the Patriots were right there. They've got a lot to look forward to, and they did a really good job of containing a very good Buccaneers offense. I also really noticed the absence of Rob Gronkowski. He creates a dimension there that he's like the never-ending safety valve for Tom Brady. And without him there last night, I think it really hindered that Tampa Bay offense.
Were you as impressed as I was by the unbelievable performance put forth by Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals going up against the LA Rams in LA to hand them their first loss of the season?
Yeah, that caught me off by surprise. I expected that game to be a good one. Like that's two undefeated teams, like two teams that are playing well. But Kyler, I think what surprised me more than anything was Kyler Murray did more with his arms and with his reads. He was throwing the ball exceptionally well yesterday, where we're really used to seeing him use his athleticism and run the ball a lot and sort of scramble to continue plays. He almost played most of the game like a pocket passer, and his reads were really good. And in some ways, he really cut up that Rams defense, particularly in the second and third quarter, right? Like he was all over them.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out. I know it's only by 3 points, but Zack Wilson, the number 2 overall pick in the NFL, led the New York Jets to their first win of the season, 27-24. So big shout out to the Jets for possibly getting one of only about 3 wins this season. So congratulations on pulling that out. And, we talked about the Detroit Lions last week losing to a 66-yard record-breaking Justin Tucker field goal. I feel like on the other side, in the other division, the Atlanta Falcons have recently turned into another version of the Detroit Lions, and they just continue to find a way to lose. And I feel bad for them because Matt Ryan is still a premier quarterback in my mind. He just doesn't have the right pieces around him on the defensive side of the ball and on the offensive line. Yes, he has Calvin Ridley and a few other great young offensive pieces, but they were up 30-22 late in that game and lost 34-30 to the Washington football team. Taylor Heineke and Ron Rivera pulled the rabbit out of their hat again.
Yeah, there's a few things to unpack there. I mean, the Lions are going to lion. We talked about it last week where, you were hoping that maybe they could sort out a way to break their losing streak. And then they just put up an absolute stinker against Chicago. In Atlanta, I mean, that Washington football team is coming along. That's not a bad football team. And boy, it's hard to say anything about Matt Ryan. The guy put up 4 touchdowns yesterday, like
and 380 passing yards or something like that.
Right. So it's got to be heartbreaking for him. I still think the Detroit Lions take the Heartache Bowl to a new level. I don't think the Falcons are quite there yet, but boy, you got to feel for Matty Ice.
Any thoughts on Zack Wilson and the Jets?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot about the Jets. Yeah, I mean, good for the Jets. I think you're right. I think that team's going to be in tough. I didn't see them beating the Tennessee Titans this week, but yeah, good for them. Got to feel good for a young quarterback to get that first NFL win. Probably, nothing like it. You remember it for the rest of your life. So good for him.
And I believe in our week 4 preview on Friday, I did call the New York Jets on the point spread as well. So if you were listening to Friday's edition, you got some pretty good stuff this week. On Thursday, I said, take Jacksonville plus the points. And on Friday, I said, take the Jets because of the injuries to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, respectively. And Spence was 2 for 2 in that particular case.
Will you be sending out your personal address to get your cut of everyone's winnings, or Are you just going to let him keep it this week?
No, that might be a little bit dangerous with the event that occur here. Always great to chop it up with you, my friend. Tomorrow we start our week of NHL previews, because if you can believe it, a week from now is the beginning of the NHL season. So you want to stick around the rest of the week as we have some NHL guests, including James Duthie, join us to break down the upcoming NHL season and some of the teams. And for Paul Shields, I am Spencer Miller. This has been the Isolation Series, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks once again for tuning in to today's episode of the Isolation Series with me, Spencer Miller, and that guy right over there, Paul Shields. As always, today's show has been brought to you by wellbeingsperformance.com for all your virtual meeting and virtual needs, period. Please go to wellbeingsperformance.com, as well as Barbarian Steakhouse, Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's premier steakhouse facility since 1959. For more information, including any new updates on their menu, please go to barbarians.com, as well as imprintpilates.com, Toronto's premier Pilates studio, and greenstorage.ca, Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area's #1 self-storage facility. For more information, please go to greenstorage.ca. And Paul, please tell people all about some more whole grain goodness that is us.
Folks, be sure to check us out on podbean.com by going to theisolationseries.podbean.com. There you'll find the audio-only versions of the podcast, including all of our past amazing interviews. One more time, that's theisolationseries.podbean.com. And hey, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. It's at @thespencermiller and at Pauly Shields, Pauly spelled Pawly. So find us on podbean.com, follow us on Instagram, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
And once again, everybody, thank you for watching and or listening and supporting this thing we like to call the Isolation Series. For Paul Shields, I am Spencer Miller, and we will see you again very, very soon.